Hi everybody, I'm Jack Wheeler and I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober by the grace of God and the 36 spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous since January 1st, 2004, and for that I am very grateful. Thank you all for that. It's never easy to follow Bob, but at the same time I follow him. You know, he's my sponsor. He's been my sponsor for a long time. Thank you for that. I was talking to Steve Lee 2 years ago because I was asked to do this a couple years ago, and we got bumped for Steve and Scott last year. And the minute I was asked to do this, there was something inside me that just kind of rolled over a little bit. And I was telling Steve, because I don't generally get nervous with these things. And Steve said, Jack, you're nervous because it's a home game. And that's what it feels like here. It's a home game. And I know you and you know me, and this conference, this retreat has, it's important to me. You know, when I asked Bob to sponsor me, I think it was 11 years ago, one of the first directions he gave me was, he said yes, he'd sponsor me, which was a relief. And then he said, I want you to come to this retreat every year. And I put my application in, and I did not get in the first year, so if you spent time waiting, I have too. I'm not good at it. And then I got in, and I've been coming ever since. And it's a special deal. You know, that over the course of the weekend, I want to read something that kind of sets up the weekend for me. When I met Charlie Parker, was a good friend of mine. And when I met him, he introduced me to this thing called spiritual consent. And I'm going to read you something Charlie wrote about spiritual consent. It says, spiritual consent was one of the first tools taught to me by my sponsor, Mark Houston. The idea of spiritual consent is that I'm giving you the right to call me on any behavior that you see me exhibiting, whether it hurts my feelings or not. We'd rather step on your toes than stand on your grave. One has to formally establish spiritual consent with another. The considerations are always given in the spirit of love and compassion. Brutal honesty will not fit the bill. With these comments, we try to follow the path of consideration. We try for the comments to begin with, is it possible that, or I'd like to offer you for consideration that. This method seems to effectively get past our defense mechanisms. This conference, this retreat, this gathering of people gets through my defense mechanism. Somewhere during the weekend, some truth, something will come to light for me, and I'll be changed forever. And I hope that's your experience too, because we come in here defended. Living life out there, I get defended. And the last key element of the method is that when one is offered a consideration, the only response allowed is simply thank you, or thanks, I'll take that under consideration. Sometimes I take it under consideration and never do anything else with it. This keeps the ego from going into self-defense mode. If one is allowed to respond to a consideration, the only thing we are going to get is the ego trying to defend itself by telling you how you are looking at everything all wrong. This usually comes with a long explanation or story, the story in our heads. You know, there's always a story in my head. Responses to consideration need to come the next day or the next gathering of the group. I have a clear memory of calling Mark one day to report another member's outrageous behavior at a meeting. Imagine that, Charlie calling behavior outrageous. And lost my place. Outrageous behavior at a meeting and how I should approach him. Mark asked, do you have spiritual consent with him? I said, well, no, to which he replied, then it's none of your business. Tough concept to accept from me. I'd always operated under the theory of, if not me, who? Mark was big on a position of neutrality in many matters. Having spiritual consent with a small group or with another individual is a powerful tool for growth. It is an honor to be given spiritual consent from another. Avoid sarcasm and silliness at all costs. This tool can greatly aid aid us in our quest to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Charlie P., 2012. I'm wide open, and I'm asking you and giving you spiritual consent. And it's important in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, that we do that with each other. It is effective. This weekend's, I've had this story in my head, and when we talk about it being a home game, it's because I care about you, and I know you guys care about me, and that's a conversation that I'm not used to, because I'm so defended. So anyway, I invite you guys with spiritual consent this weekend. I spent the last 30 some odd years close to 40 on a family ranch. And my dad thinks it's hilarious when I get to come to these things, and he thinks it's very funny that you guys invite a cowboy from Colorado to come talk about God, and I do too. But that's what we're going to talk about. And on the ranch, my mom and dad love Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. It gave them their son back. And my mom has always said for years that if somebody doesn't have a place to go on the holidays, bring them to the ranch. And in the last 5 years, we've sold the ranch now, but in the last 5 years, I had a new guy sitting at the holiday table at the ranch, and he said to me, he said, "When did you take your first drink?" And I thought about it for a minute, and I said to him, I was probably 8 years old, and my mom across the table from me said, "No, you did not." She's calling me a liar in front of the new guy. And I said, "No, Mom, I did." And she was upset. She said, "How could that be?" And I said, "Dad and I would go snowmobiling, and we'd ride in the morning, and about noontime we'd stop for lunch, and my dad always had a Boda bag full of peach brandy, and he would give me a sip of the Boda bag. And my mom's getting pissed off at my dad at this point, and I enjoy that. And I said to my mom, I said, "That has nothing to do with me being an alcoholic," because she thinks that might have something to do with it. And I said, "That's not why." I said, I have these things, two things that make me an alcoholic. I said, when I put alcohol in my body, I get the phenomenon of craving. I said, my body just wants more. It's a different reaction than most people get. And my mom's sitting there listening to me, and I can tell she has no idea what I'm talking about. And because you try and explain the phenomenon of craving to somebody that's never experienced it, they have no idea what you're talking about. No clue. Yet I come in here and I tell you that, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the magic here. You identify completely with what I'm saying because you've experienced the phenomenon of craving. And I said to my mom, I said, "That's not the only thing that happens." I said, "I have this other thing. The illness centers in my mind. I have this other thing when I'm stone cold sober, standing in the burning wreckage of my life one more time. I have a mind that will convince me it's a good idea to take a drink again." I said to her, those two things, that mind and body, make me an alcoholic. And she still thinks today that I quit drinking. That somewhere along the line I quit drinking. You guys know different. I never quit drinking in my life. It's not how I roll. And she thinks I did. My wife thinks I quit drinking finally. That's not the way it is in here. And the cool thing is I can come in here and tell you guys that, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because you've sat in my shoes, I've sat in your shoes. We're the same. We are so much more the same than we are different. It's amazing. And to give you an idea how I roll, I was riding a ski lift up the mountain when I was about 16 years old, 15 or 16. And this beautiful blonde, I'm with my sister, and this beautiful blonde skis underneath the ski lift. And I said to my sister, "I'm going to marry her." She said, "Who is she?" I said, "I don't know, but I've seen her around school." And I'm married to her today. And there's one of my greatest character defects that has become one of my greatest assets in Alcoholics Anonymous is my stalking skills. And we have been together a long time, and I say that only half in jest, because stalking skills can come in really handy here. You know, I see men that have what I want, and I follow them around. You know, I'm that guy that will hear somebody like Bob will say, I'm doing this on this date, and I'm doing that on that date then, and I'll show up. You know, and I've done that for a long time around here, and it has served me well. So stalking skills are important. You can write that down. And my wife and I will celebrate 45 years being together this coming month. And it's a direct reflection of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. She works a great program. And but the cool thing is that we don't sponsor each other. She has a sponsor in a program, and I have a sponsor in a program. There's some real magic that meets in the middle there, but we each have our own program. And when guys come to me and tell me that they found her, I tell them, don't sponsor each other. You know, maintain your program. Keep doing the things you're doing, because we get in trouble that way. You know, by the time I was 12 years old, I was drinking regularly. I was in trouble in every area of my life. School, work, home, everywhere. And, you know, I couldn't keep a relationship. And I was taken to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous by a really astute school counselor when I was 13 years old. And I walked into the room. I'm from Aspen. Aspen is a small town. And we walked into the community center one night and with the school counselor, and there's a card table like this one. And it was the mid-'70s in Aspen. There's probably 6 or 7 people sitting around the card table, and they all had gray hair, or looked like they should have gray hair. They were very old, like 35. And I did what we do. I did what my ego does. I came in and I saw all the differences. The only thing that I came out of that meeting with that became important later on in life is that there's something called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had cut a deal with that school counselor. And the deal was that I would only drink beer on the weekends. I wouldn't drink Jack Daniels anymore. And think about that. 12, 13-year-old kid cutting a deal with the school counselor that I'm only going to drink beer and I'm not going to drink Jack Daniels. That's a good deal. And then first weekend I went out and it went fine. I only drank beer. I didn't drink any Jack Daniels. And then the second weekend I went out, and you know the story. We ran out of beer, and there was still Jack Daniels. So I drank the Jack Daniels, even though I didn't. It was important to me to do what I said, and I couldn't do it. I drank the Jack Daniels, and I was so humiliated by that, I stopped going to see that counselor. I've not seen her since, and I wanted to not drink that weekend, and I could not do it. You know, I had beer in my system, and the beer was gone, and there was still Jack Daniels, and my body says, game on. And I couldn't follow through with something that was important to me. And that's the story of my life. By the time I was 16 years old, I knew every cop in Aspen by name. I used to think that they followed me around and would shake me down on a Friday or a Saturday night just to take my drugs. At some point, I still believed they were scoring their 8-ball. And I've talked to the cops now as a fireman for a long time, so I know a lot of cops, and they said back then that probably was true. And they would shake me down, they'd take my drugs, they'd take my booze, and then they'd tell me to go home and be a good boy, and I couldn't do those things. I wanted to. I didn't want to get in trouble. And I was in trouble time and time again. You know, I used to watch the guys I was hanging out with, and it seemed like they could do the things I could do and wouldn't get in trouble. And what I realize now, the rear view mirror is crystal clear, and is that I was changing friends. You know, I'd go out with this group of friends until they went home, and then I'd find another group of friends and hang out with them until they went home. I was the common denominator. And you know, I figured out by the time I was 16 years old, I figured out that if I'd go into the sheriff's department, the ranch was a long ways from town. It was 35 miles from town, and there was no buses, no traffic. It was a back road, and I didn't have a license. And I'd go into the sheriff's department late at night, and drunk in the lobby of the sheriff's department, and And they would load me in a patrol car, they'd drive me to the ranch, they'd pull up to the bottom of the driveway, they'd kick me out, and they never talked to my parents. It was the original Uber, and I did it time and time again. And, it was a different time. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it was a different time. And by the time I was 18 years old, I used to say from the podium that my parents had kicked me out of the house, but that's not true. Through the amends process and good sponsorship, they told me I could live there if I could live under 3 simple rules, and I couldn't get it done. The rules were to do what I said I'm going to do, to help out around the house, and to be where I said I was going to be. And I couldn't get those things done. So I made it their fault, and I moved out of the house, and I moved in with my drug dealer, which we do. And that didn't work out because we had competing values. He wanted to sell it, and I wanted to do it. And I got kicked out of the house there. And then I managed to rent an apartment. And surprise, they want you to pay rent regularly. And I couldn't get that done. I'd plan on it, and I'd make the arrangements, and I'd have the money, and I'd spend the money on booze, on drugs, whatever. And I couldn't get rent paid, and I lost the apartment, and then I just went from couch to couch, as we do, and I burned every friendship I had to the ground. And, I ended up living in a jungle gym, a little playground structure in one of the parks in Aspen. We jokingly call it Heroin Park. It's actually Heron Park. And they just remodeled it a few years ago, and I was a little envious because it's a very nice playhouse now. And I'd go until I couldn't go anymore, and I'd crawl up inside that playhouse, and I'd pass out, and I'd come to, and I'd do it all again. And one night when I was living there, I overshot the mark with the cocaine because I drank too much Crown to measure the cocaine properly, and I OD'd in the park in Aspen, and ended up in the hospital. And it was one of those close calls. I thought I was going to die. They thought I was going to die. It was one of those things that woke me up a little bit. And I was laying in the hospital bed, and they're checking me out, and I'm thinking about this girl, a good friend of ours that I hung out with, named Karen. And Karen had gone away for 28 days. Where do you go for 28 days? And she had come back, and she was entirely different. She would smile all the time. She was carefree and easy, and I noticed those things. I noticed how she had changed. And I called her up the morning I got out of the hospital, and I asked her, Karen, what'd you do? And she explained to me that she had gone to treatment and been separated from alcohol, and that she was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she talked to me about that phenomenon of craving. She talked to me about the mental obsession, that thing that gets in my mind when I'm stone cold sober and convinces me that it's a good idea one more time. And she went through the doctor's opinion with me, and I could see myself in her story. I could see it sounded a lot like what I was doing, a lot like it fit the bill. And she told me what she had done and where she had gone, and I called my mom, and my mom is a saint. I hadn't talked to my mom in a while because I had made it her fault when I moved out of the house, and I called her up out of the blue, and I said, Mom, I'm in trouble, and I need to talk to you. She said, okay. And we met at my place, and we're sitting on the park bench, and I'm in clothes that are 3 sizes too small, that aren't mine, wrung out from a 3-week bender, just got out of the hospital, and it's a really important part of my story. I said to my mom, I'm in trouble. I think I'm an alcoholic. And what she said to me is, no, you're not. You can't be. That stigma about alcoholism has to go away. My mom thought if I was an alcoholic, it made her a bad mother. She thought if I was an alcoholic, that the community would look down on us. She thought if I was an alcoholic, the community would look down on me. And my mom's a saint, and she listened to me for a while, and she made it possible for me to go to treatment. I went to treatment when I was 18 years old. And I went into the treatment center, and I stayed for the whole time, and I hadn't had a drink in 30 days or however long I was there. And it's a 4-hour drive from where the treatment center is back to Aspen. And I'm on the 4-hour drive, and I'm terrified. I don't want to drink. And I had no idea how to do that. And I was thinking about the thing that came to my mind on the trip back to Aspen was I had heard the counselors at one point in a break room talking to each other, not talking to us. We didn't listen when they talked to us. And they were talking to each other, and one of them said to the other, if we could get these knuckleheads to go to a meeting within the first 24 hours of when they get out, their chances of long-term recovery skyrocket. And that's what came into my mind. And it was 1982, and I think there were 3 meetings a week in Aspen at that time. And I roll into Aspen, and I found out that there was a meeting that night. Coincidence, right? There was a meeting that night, and I walked into the meeting, and the night I got out of treatment, and there was a card table like that, and there was probably, 12 people at this point. Alcoholics Anonymous had boomed, apparently. And they're sitting around the room, and they're reading out of the big book, and one guy opened up and read something and then went around the table, and everybody shared their experience with what was read. And it would come to me, and I'd throw down about a big bag of gag or some cocaine or something. And I know I'm sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, dying of alcoholism, trying to be the center of attention one more time. And you know what they said to me? They said, keep coming back. And if you're new here, I have news for you. You're going to find out that the old timers can't hear. And this one old guy would come after the meeting. He came up to me and said, we're going into the prison on Friday night to take a meeting. Do you want to come? And I said, no, Bruce, I definitely don't want to go to the prison on Friday night. I'm very busy on Friday night. And I was busy. I was sitting in my one-room apartment below the Holiday Inn, terrified and just trying not to drink. And when you're trying not to drink and you have alcoholism like I do, it's an activity. You know, and I thought that's what you guys did here, was sit around and not drink. And the next week I'd go to that meeting, and he would come up to me after the meeting. He would say, hey, Jack, we're going to the prison on Friday night. Do you want to come? No, Bruce, I'm very busy on Friday night. I don't want to go to the prison. And week after week he would do that. I don't know if it was 8 or 9 weeks into it, but finally I said yes to him just to shut him up, just so he wouldn't come up to me and ask me that question. And he told me where to be on Friday afternoon, and I'm standing on the corner where he told me to be, and he comes rolling up in a minivan full of you guys smiling. And I don't want to get in a minivan even if there's nobody in it. And I got in the minivan, and it's a 90-mile drive to the prison from where we are, and I spent the next hour and a half terrified listening to you guys joke and have fun and laugh, and all I could think about was I was terrified. And we roll up to the prison, and it's a real prison. I've been in there many times since. I still take meetings into correctional facilities. And we roll up to the prison, and there's guard tower and chain link fences, and we clear all that stuff, and we're walking down by the dorms. And from the third floor window of the dorms, I hear, hey, Wheeler. And I just about fainted. And Bruce, without missing a step, said, you're in the right place. And just kept on going. And it's funny, but the reality is that I've been put in some places that I didn't want to go. I didn't feel qualified to go, and I said yes because I was available to go. And it's wonderful. You know, I've been put in some places that I never would have went, and it's changed my whole life. And that's what happened that day. I went into that jail because I wanted him to shut up. And it changed my life. I still take meetings into correctional facilities today. It's a big part of my life. I was the corrections chair for our area, corrections chair for our district, and it's a good thing. And I wouldn't have went. I promise you that. If I would have waited till I was willing to go instead of available to go, I still wouldn't be in a prison. You know, I'm the guy that'll sit around and tell you I got nothing to offer them. I've never spent the night in jail. I got news for you. They're not asking you how to do time. They're asking you what the hell to do when they get out, what the hell they're going to do while they're in there. And we have the solution for that. I have experience with that I can share with them. And that guy sponsored me. He took me through the steps lovingly, compassionately, spoon-fed me the steps and got me through the steps. And I had the spiritual awakening that's promised. And I started sponsoring guys. I got a commitment in my home group. I was a good member of my home group. Things were just good. And as that happened, got all the stuff back. House, car, the vehicles, the kids, wife, married, all of it came back. Business. And I'm driving down the road to my home group one day. And in order from the ranch to my home group's about a 35-mile drive along one of the best trout streams in the world. And I'm driving down and the hatch is coming off, the green drake hatch is coming off the river. And I think to myself, I should fish. And it didn't take long. I pulled over and I fished that hatch. And you know what happened to me when I didn't go to my home group and I went fishing instead? Nothing. Not one thing. I went fishing. It was great. About 2 weeks later, I'm driving down to the Thursday night meeting, and that same hatch is coming off, and I think to myself, I should fish that hatch. And I pulled over and I fished the hatch and didn't go to the Thursday night meeting. You know what happened to me when I didn't go to the Thursday night meeting? Nothing. You know, I went fishing. The insidious nature of alcoholism is that I can't see it on me. When the veil's dropping over my eyes one more time, I can't see it. I do not recognize it. That's why we're all here, because we can't fix ourselves. We can't even see that there's a problem. And I can tell you that I slowly unplugged from Alcoholics Anonymous, and it wasn't quick. I just, unplug it over here, unplug it over there. And eventually I was going to meetings when my ass was on fire, and that was the only time. I stopped calling my sponsor. The guys I was sponsoring stopped calling me because I was a bad sponsor. And I just unplugged from Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you would have asked me the day before I drank if I was ever going to drink again, I'd have told you no, and I would have passed a lie detector test. And the next day I was drunk. 13 years sober, I'm drinking again. And I'd love to tell you that with my knowledge of Alcoholics Anonymous, my knowledge of the book, my understanding of how this thing works, that I came running back to you. But I am powerless over alcohol. I was out for 10 years. And it was a miserable 10 years. And the first time I was homeless, living in a jungle gym in a park. Second time, I'm flying around on private planes. I've got offices in Aspen, Jackson Hole, and Kona. I got 250 employees. I can't outspend my income. This thing doesn't care who we are. Doesn't care where we came from. Alcoholism it just is. And in that 10 years, it was, I can remember I was closing a deal in Hawaii, and I'm sitting at in one of the finest hotels in Kona. And I'm sitting in the thing, and we're celebrating a $20 million contract. We're sitting around, and the owner of the thing we're going to build, and my partners are there. It's a crew of people around this table in the canoe club. And this guy orders, and my partner's wife was in town, and he asked me if I'd drive that night. And I said, yeah. And the guy, the owner that's celebrating this wonderful deal for us, he said it was 100-year-old port. I don't know what port is. Don't care what port is. I can tell you this, it comes in a small glass, and he's got them lined up on the table. And he's inviting me to taste the port. And I know deep inside me that if I take a sip, it's game on. I know about alcoholism. I absolutely know how it's going to react in me. And I said to him, no, thank you, and went on. And then 10 minutes later, he's begging me to take a sip of the port. And finally, I said to him, I didn't know what to do, because I knew if I took a sip, then I'd get drunk and I couldn't drive them home, or if I had to drive them home, then it's a long story. But so I finally said to him, I don't want your goddamn port, and which isn't a nice way to handle anything. And we lost the contract. And now my partner's pissed off at me. So we get back to the hotel, and I drank everything in the minibar, and it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm arguing with room service at 2 o'clock in the morning to bring me more booze. And that's what it looks like on me, fully aware of what alcoholism is, and I can do nothing about it. If I could feed this thing to myself, I wouldn't be here. You'd have a different speaker. We can't feed it to ourselves. You know, it doesn't work that way. Somehow, when I feed it to you, I am sustained. That's the magic of this thing. It was one thing, I can remember I had an apartment on a Lee Drive in Kona, and right down the road, my wife didn't know I was drinking. That's where the complication in all this comes in. I hid it well. That's why I had offices all over the world, just so I'd go out of town and drink, and I'd go out of town and I'd drink the whole time I was gone. I'd come home and I'd eat Percocet the whole time I was home because she couldn't smell it on my breath. And I'd get up in the morning at the condo, and I'd been drinking all night long, and I'd limp down the 2 blocks down from where the condo was. There was it was either 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I think it was an 8 a.m. meeting, Aloha Mana group. And I'd go down there and I'd sit through the meeting with all you guys smiling, and I'd be bleeding from my eyeballs, dying of alcoholism. And I'd sit through the meeting, and as I left the meeting, I would call my wife back in Colorado, and I'd say, "Hey, hon, I'm just leaving the meeting, heading to the office." That's the insanity of this thing. I did that just so I didn't have to lie to my wife, so that I could tell her I'm just leaving the meeting. I'm trying not to lie to my wife, and my whole life is a lie. That's the insanity of this thing, is we just can't differentiate the true from the false. We can't figure it out. And I was probably year 8 when I was out on the run, and my mom called me up in Hawaii, and she said, "Hey, Jack, we need to talk." And she said, "Your dad's dying of kidney failure and needs a kidney. Will you please get tested to see if you're a match?" I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the only son. And she had put all that together, that I'm his best shot. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what she had put all together. And I said, "Remember, I'm living on a ranch with my family, raising my kids there. My parents are my neighbor. I love my dad." And I said, "Of course I'll go get tested." And I hung up the phone and I started thinking about it, and it's like, if I go get tested, that's evidence, and they're going to find out that I'm drinking and using, and the game's going to be up. So I figured out on my own, with no medical license, that I had to be clean for 7 days in order to do a clean test. Don't know if that's true today. And Martin's saying no. And I got this story in my head that I gotta just go 7 days to save my dad's life. And I can tell you, to this day, I have never been tested. I could not make the 7 days. I would wake up in the morning earnest to get that test, to help my dad. My mom's calling me every other day saying, "Hey, did you go?" Then she's making me appointments with the doctor to go get the test, and I would tell her I'd be there, and I never showed up for one. And to make sure I don't forget, my dad's fine. He got a kidney from my brother-in-law. But I have guys show up at my house all the time, and they're like, "I'm getting married, or I'm having a kid, and now's the time. I'm going to do better. I'm going to dig into this thing. I'm going to make it a priority." And I tell them it doesn't work that way. You know, we can't do this for someone else. We can't do this because I'm in love with somebody. I'm in love with Jack, you know, and I don't like being uncomfortable, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances are or how it's going, I'm going to drink. That's who I am. And what I know today is that when it happened, I'm going to tell you the amends story, part of that, so I don't forget. I was probably 4 years sober, and I'm sitting in my home group, and the topic at my home group is the 8th step. And we get about 3/4 of the way through the meeting, and I'm sitting next to Tim's wife, Gigi, and I'm crying my eyes out because I'd heard the 8th step like I'd never heard it before. Made a list of all the people we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. All of the people we have harmed, That's a long list. That's not all the people I'm resentful at. That's not all the people that I've had conflict with. You know, the 12 and 12 points it out to us that while the fourth step is a good start on the 8-step list, we need to dig deeper. And that's been my experience. And I'm crying, and Gigi says, "What's wrong?" And I said, my dad needed a kidney. I never showed up for him. I've never made amends for it. And Gigi says to me, "You got to go make amends." I said, "Duh." And I got in my truck the next day, and I drove up to the ranch. And I pull into the ranch, and my dad's cruising around in his Polaris Ranger, and he's a rough, tough cowboy contractor. And he pulls up in front of my truck, and he can see I'm crying sitting in my truck, and I can see he thinks something's wrong. So I'm trying to hurry up and get out to him. And I walk up to the Ranger, and I said, "I'm crying." Dad's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "There's a piece of spiritual business I need to talk to you about. I have an amends I need to make with you." And he said, "Oh, no, we've already done all that," because we had. You know, we cleaned up everything I could see at the time. The cool thing is as we do this thing, we get to see more. And we get to continue this process. It becomes the fabric of our lives. If you stick around here long enough, the numbers fall off the steps. And it becomes who we are, how we operate. You know, I'm not sitting in my house saying, "Oh, I got to do a step 4." I'm just writing a piece of inventory because it's eating my lunch and it's the right thing to do. And I said to Dad, I said, "I got a piece." And I said to him, "No, I know that, but this is something that came up and I really need to talk to you about it." And he said, "Okay." And I said to him, I said, "When you were dying of kidney failure and you needed a kidney and you needed me to go get tested, I didn't show up for you." I said, "I don't know how to make that right, but I'll do anything you ask me to do." And my dad starts laughing. And he says, "What I want you to do is keep doing what you're doing because I may need another one." And that's funny. I said, "But I stand here before you as a direct amends to my father. I was doing this then and I'm doing it now. You know, there's no days off here. You know, we do this thing every day." And my mom's a lot smarter than my dad. And I went to my mom and I said to her, I've got an amends that I need to make to you. And she had watched the thing go down with Dad and I in the driveway. She was sitting in the kitchen. So she knew something was up. And I said, I got an amends to make to you. And she said, "No, we've already been through all that." Isn't that that's incredible, I think. And I said, "No, this is a piece of spiritual business and I need to talk to you." And I said to her, "You know, when Dad was dying and you called me up, you'd make appointments for me and I'd lie to you and I wouldn't show up for those appointments. Your husband's dying, the father of your kid's dying, and your son can't show up." And I said to her, "I don't know what to do to make that right, but I'll do anything you ask me to do." And what she said to me, she said, "Jack, I want you to keep helping the young men you're helping. Hard stop." Because she knows the magic of this thing is one alcoholic talking to another. You know, I've done it. You know, we get caught up in our lives, and I don't have the time to take that phone call from that new guy, man. I'm a dead man if I don't. I have guys, one of the first things one of the guys that know me say when they call me is, "I know you're busy, but, you know, I don't have time not to do it." You know, that's the way it is here. I don't have time not to do it. And I wish I could tell you when I got that phone call from my mom about my dad, that was the thing. That was the entry point. I drank for another couple of years. I'm like Bill, man. I'm good. Problem's gone. 2 years later, there's Jack again. And it wasn't the worst drunk. It wasn't the worst consequences. It wasn't the worst anything. I'm sitting in my garage, and it's Christmas time, and I'm sitting there, and I'm telling you, this is where I was at. I had the big book open. I had the NA book open. A bottle of Percocet and little shooters of Kahlua. I'm not proud of that. And I'm stark raving mad. I'm drinking the Kahlua, I'm eating the Percocet, I'm reading the big book, and I'm reading the NA book trying to find something that'll work. And I watched my son and his grandfather come up the driveway out at the ranch, and they're pulling the family Christmas tree. And they had gone out up on the ranch and cut a Christmas tree for the family, and I was too busy to go with them. I told you what I was doing, but I was too busy to go with them to get the Christmas tree, and I don't know why, but that was my opening. And I went in the house to tell my wife what was going on, and she had been back to Al-Anon the year before. And I started into the story, the vomit of what's going on. And she put her hand up, and she said, go talk to your sponsor. Because I had come back into Alcoholics Anonymous and spent a year lying to my sponsor and doing what we do. And I did what she said, and I went down to my sponsor's house and told him the truth of what was going on, and shared my plan of recovery with him. And he changed my plan, and which is good. And I ended up going into a treatment facility and was separated from alcohol for the last time. And I came out of that treatment center on fire with Alcoholics Anonymous. The treatment center had taken us to meetings, and I had grabbed hold again, and I was doing the deal. And I'm sitting in the Thursday night step study in Carbondale, about 8 months sober, and it was a blizzard out. And the main basement of the church was all boarded up because the boilers were out in the church, and we were meeting this night in a little building behind the church. And it's a blizzard out, and it's about 8:10, and the door blows open, and this couple that were underdressed and overjeweled for our area come in at 10 after 8, and it's a blizzard out. And I had never seen these two before, and I'm thinking to myself, cool, she's bringing him to a meeting. It's a small town, you know everybody, and didn't know them. And I'm sitting watching the clock thinking 9 o'clock hits, man, I'm on this guy, and I got a big book in my hand, and I got to beat Tim to him. And 9 o'clock hit, and I'm on him, and it's like, hey, I'm Jack. Do you have a big book? What's your name? I have, just trying to start the conversation. It took about 5 minutes for me to understand the terms of the relationship, and that man became my sponsor. It's a guy by the name of Don Maloney that was in town looking at real estate, and he and Karen swept us up and changed our lives. I'd gone through most of the steps with him, and we're working on some of them. And he says to me one night, he says, Jack, I want you to buy a plane ticket. I was like, where are we going? He said, well, we're going to go down to this AA Al-Anon thing in Texas. And I said, Don, I do not want to go to an AA Al-Anon thing in Texas. He said, that's good, Jack. I didn't ask you if you wanted to go. I asked you to buy a plane ticket. And I went home, and he said to me, and I want Steph to come too. And I'm thinking that's never going to happen. And I went home, and I had a conversation with Steph, and I don't know where it came from to this day, but I said to her, I want to go. And we decided to go down to Texas, and they took us down to this conference down in Texas, and we roll in on a Thursday night, and we go to some God as you understand a meeting Thursday night. We didn't been there 10 minutes, and we're in a meeting. And then we wake up on Friday, and we go to meetings together all day long on Friday, and then we hear the Friday night speaker, and then we go to the stupid bonfire gratitude meeting afterwards. We get up on Saturday, and we go to meetings all day long on Saturday, and then there's this stupid ice cream social after the Saturday night speaker. And we get up Sunday, and we go to meetings all morning Sunday, and we get in the car to leave, and I said to Don, where are we going? He said, well, we're going to go to a meeting. And I'm like, Don, we've been at meetings since Thursday. And he said, well, that's what we do here. We go to meetings. And they took us to our first home meeting. And we're sitting in the living room of Jerry and Billy's house, these people that became giants in our lives. And Steph is on the couch behind me crying her eyes out in the living room in front of everybody, embarrassing me. And Billy said to Steph, why are you crying? And Steph said, why are you doing this for us? And Billy said, we're doing it for you because someone did it for us. And one day you're going to do it for someone else. That's why we're here this weekend. That's the only reason. There are people dying within a stone's throw of this place of alcoholism. And if we don't do it, who will? Bob was there that night, he and Linda. And I'm raw. Karen just died. Don's wife. And when you get Don as a sponsor, you got Karen too. Don didn't sit down with me and tell me how to correctly write a fourth step, or exactly how to do a third step. He took me through the book, don't get me wrong. When I was dying of alcoholism, they showed me what it looked like. They said, get in the car. They said, buy a plane ticket. They said, come to our house. I went back and saw Karen. In the last 2 months, she was in hospice. And she sponsored my daughter for 16. My daughter and my wife and I flew back there, and we saw her, and we sat with her. And the whole time we were there, she shared with us what we had given her. She shared with us what we had given her. And I thought I was just taking. Holy shit. And that's the magic in this room. Right here, right now. She made me promise to tell this story, included in my story. We've all heard Bob tell a story about finding those people down there and how they blew the top off of his life. And how he bought a house, his stalking skills, bought a house down there because he didn't want to lose the relationships. I did too. And I hadn't put it together until Karen said that. I did the same thing. I met them down there and they breathed life into us when we couldn't take another breath. By including us in their life, they showed us what it looked like to lead principled lives. And when I say that, it's easy for me to be a principled man between the Serenity Prayer and the Lord's Prayer. I'm talking about the other side of the Lord's Prayer. I'm talking about how it hits the pavement in my driveway. And they showed me what that looked like. They showed me it was possible. And it was, I don't need that. I'm good, man. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm good, Olaf. And they included us in their lives, and it changed everything for us. My experience with this thing is that the greatest gift I ever got in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I didn't get what I wanted. Because I'd have sold you short. I'd have sold God short. My wife and I had a houseboat on Lake Powell for a lot of years. And once a year we'd take a trip down there. And my sponsor would come, Karen would come, Steph's sponsor and her husband would come, and all our road dogs would come. Tim and his kids would be there. And we'd go down and play together. You know, Friday we'd have that stupid bonfire meeting. Then we'd go on the ice cream runs. And we'd play together for 4 days, and we'd have meetings at night, and we'd pray and meditate together. And on the last day of the trip, I'm cleaning up the houseboat, and I'm sliding down the side of the houseboat, pulling anchors and putting things away and stowing everything. And I hear the kids up on the roof of the houseboat playing. And this is what I hear. The kids, little kids. Tim's kids were there. And this is what I hear. You're the sponsor, you're the Al-Anon, you're the new guy, you're the chairperson. And they're up on the roof of the houseboat playing Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think if we're doing it so well that the kids are copying us, we're right where God wants us. Thank you.